All right, fantastic. Thank you, Melissa. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Cord Bucher. I'm the Deputy Director here at Youth Development Division. And go ahead and if we could go to the next slide, we'll let you know what we're going to be doing today.
I'm working on it. The controls are a little laggy this morning. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, we have such a big crowd, it's slowing everything down. I think my camera is a bit wonky too. Okay, great. So we'll start out, we'll introduce ourselves and do a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to provide you with some background on Future Ready Oregon and some information about this grant. We're going to talk about a few key application elements, just things we really want to call your attention to. And then we're going to open this up for questions and responses. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so today's webinar is hosted by the Youth Development Division and ODE Procurement staff. I'm just going to ask my colleagues to each come off mute and introduce yourself. And attendees, you don't need to do introductions in the chat. We do thank you for registering, and we'll be following up with you at the email address that you registered with. So I will turn it over to, we'll start with my colleague, Jared.
Morning, everybody. Jared Shaw, Grant Manager and Workforce Policy Analyst with YDD. Thank you all for joining today. I'll turn it over to Bill.
Good morning. My name is Bill Hansel. I am a Grant Manager and Policy Analyst with Youth Development Division, and I think my title is Data Guy.
Melissa, can we hear from you?
I think so. Thank you for your patience again. Melissa Gallardo, Executive Support for YDD, and holding this meeting in Zoom because it usually plays more nicely with us, but it's being a little laggy this morning. Thanks.
Bethany?
Morning, I'm Bethany Moreland. I am a procurement specialist and the single point of contact on this RFA.
Awesome, thanks. And is Philip here?
Good morning. My name is Philip Hoffman. I'm the Assistant Director of Procurement for the Oregon Department of Education. I'm just helping Bethany with today's meeting.
All right. So just a couple of things for everybody who's joining us. We really appreciate you making some time this morning. First of all, this meeting is being recorded. We're going to make it available on our website on the Future Ready page. So if you want to turn your camera off, that's totally fine. Please mute your microphone and be sure to enter all questions in the chat. It's very important that we capture them there. That's really going to help us. We're going to take all of the questions from today's conversation and include those as well as the responses in a document that we will be publishing with all questions and answers about this grant. All of the responses, oh, I'm sorry, Tanasia, I didn't realize you were here. Let me pause and ask Tanasia, my colleague from YDD, to introduce herself.
Oh, hello, everyone. My name is Tanasia Bishop. I am new to YDD, and I am the administrative specialist for the youth success team and helping out with Future Ready. Thank you, Cord.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Bill. Let me know. And is there anyone else from YDD on the call? I should stop and find out. I actually see a couple of names. So any other YDD folks, please hop on and say hello.
Hi, I'm Paul Sell. I'm the Re-Engagement Systems Manager and the Youth Grants Lead. I'm just in the background listening.
Hi, I'm Molly Burns. I'm a Re-Engagement Grant Manager.
All right, it looks like that's all of us. So sorry for omitting anyone. I'm really happy to see so many from our team here today. I'll jump back into this. So as I said, please mute your mic. Please enter questions in the chat. All the responses that we provide today are non-binding. That just means that we want to make sure that although we'll do our best to answer questions, if we have omitted something or need to correct our answer, we will do that, and we'll have a final answer published following the close of the Q&A period. That period ends on Friday, this Friday, July 15th. So after that, we will not be taking any more questions about the RFA, and we will publish a document with all questions and the responses sometime the following week by Friday, July 22nd. And that will be posted on the YDD Future Ready webpage. And this slide deck will also be available on that webpage. I think we could probably email that out to folks as well, to the email address you've registered with. We're happy to share the materials and make sure everyone has access to them. Can I go to the next slide, please? All right, so we're going to move into the Future Ready background and give you an overview of this grant. Next slide, please. All right, well, I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about what Future Ready Oregon is and give some background on that for those of you who are not familiar. Future Ready Oregon was a piece of legislation, Senate Bill 1545, passed in the 2022 session. This originated in the Governor's Racial Justice Council Workforce Work Group. It's a $200 million investment in the Oregon workforce system. Most of that funding is going out through grants by the Higher Education Coordinating Committee, but the Bureau of Labor and Industries, or BOLI, and Youth Development Division are also receiving funds that we are making grants with. The investments, Future Ready Oregon, are geared to address inequities in the workforce system, prioritize key populations, including communities of color, individuals with disabilities, LGBTQ+ individuals, justice system involved, reentering individuals, rural communities, and more. There's a full list we'll talk about later in this presentation. The YTD youth programs, or Section 7 of the legislation, talks about what we are here to talk to you about today, and that is to make grants that focus on youth 14 to 24 who are out of school and or work or re-engaging, and to provide services that include work readiness, paid work experience, training and quality career paths, and connection to employment. We have approximately $10 million in grant and aid through 2023-25. Not all of that is up for awarding in this first round of the Future Ready Youth Programs grant. Some of the funding is general funds, state funding. That is what we are going to be using to award the grants we're talking about today. There is also federal funding, and we'll be looking at using those dollars in a subsequent round 2 application that will come later on, probably towards the end of 2022. More on that to come, but today we'll just be talking about the current RFA and the current round. Can we go to the next slide, please? And I believe this slide I'll turn over to my colleague Jared to talk about.
Great, thanks, Court. So just some more information for all of you on the grant here. The age range for the Future Ready Programs grant is 14 through 24. Award range, you can see, is $50,000 to $150,000. And this award period for this first year will be July 1st of 2022 through June 30th of 2023. So obviously, we're past July 1st of 2022 now. These funds will be able to be backbilled to July 1st of 2022. Again, here, the purpose, which Cord talked a little bit about, this is also directly in the RFA, section 1.1, but really the purpose is to deliver workforce readiness services to out of school, unemployed, and re-engaged youth ages 14 through 24 in order to increase access, training, and placement for certain priority populations into sustainable living wage career opportunities. And so we'll go over those priority populations again in a couple slides. And then scope of activities, again, this is in the RFA section 2.4. This really just talks about what we're looking for in this grant, what the scope of activities is. And so this is to provide, again, youth out of school or unemployed or re-engaged youth ages 14 through 24 with those career exploration opportunities and those skills that are going to lead to living wage careers. So all applicants will have to show that they're going to provide 2 of these services listed at the bottom. Now, one is essential employability skills training. That's something that we're requiring all applicants to show that they will be providing. And then in addition to that, either paid work experience, specialized training that results in an industry or employer recognized credential, or job placement and job coaching. So again, everyone would have to provide essential employability skills and then one of those 3. And this again is Section 7 of Senate Bill 1545, just to get a little more background info there. Next slide, please. Timeline. So requests for applications, obviously that has launched. That was launched on June 24th. Today, info session. RFA closing date, that is going to close August 7th. We anticipate the awards to be announced late August or early September. Grant agreements anticipated to be executed in September, October. And then initial reports due. This is a slight change from what is listed in the RFA right now. But those first reports we anticipate being due October 20th. I think in the sample grant agreement, it says the 30th. For various reasons, we're just going to move that up slightly. So we anticipate first reports would be due October 20th for those first quarters. And then the next application round that Cord was mentioning for subsequent, that subsequent round for a second round of funding would be November of 2022. Next slide, please. I think I'm turning it over to Bill.
Yes, I'm going to go, thank you, Jared. I'm going to go over key elements of this application. I am also going to drop a link in the chat, which just takes you to the Ydd Technical Assistance page. Many of the links that you see in this document, the blue underlines, are links to these needed documents, and some of them will take you to those resources on our Ydd webpage. You can see that we have a link to the RFA, which is where you actually do read about the various things we're talking about today. The application will actually be done on our web portal called Surveymonkey Apply, also known as SM Apply, and you may also see it abbreviated in some places as SMA. That is where the actual application is submitted. Everything that is done in SMA is accompanied by a timestamp, and that's really important. Give yourself plenty of time to submit the application so that we don't run into technical issues around. It will cut you off at a certain time, and unfortunately, that's all there is to that. Couple of the how-to tools. An important one is how to register for Surveymonkey Apply if you do not currently have an account. An important thing here, as you can see that we have asterisks, is please register as an individual. It'll give you an opportunity to register as an entity. I forget the exact term, but please do register as an individual. It causes just some problems with some different things if there's a registration as a corporation or entity. Finally, there is a video that walks you through all this in terms of how to do the applies, and there's numerous other resources that you can find on our technical assistance page. Next slide, please. Once you're in and applying for Surveymonkey Apply, you, the registrant, will be called the owner in SMA terms. Only the owner of the application can submit. And so this is important. If you have a couple colleagues, if it's a group effort and there's some work going on, only the person that's the designated owner can submit. So you can see here that on the left side of the screen, there's a review and submit button. That submit button is what needs to be clicked on you could have all the tasks completed, and you can see over here your tasks, and there's that little half green circle. When those tasks are completed, it will become a full circle. This is really important because you can have all the tasks completed, and if you don't hit submit, your application is not submitted. So please, after all your hard work and completing all the tasks, do remember to submit the application. Next slide, please. Here we're going to, this is a list of our eligibility requirements for the grant. You can see it lists numerous kind of statuses, including the 9 federally recognized tribes in the state, nonprofits, faith-based, public benefit corporations conducting business in the state, mutual benefit corporations conducting business in the state, community college, municipal and city, state governments in this state, and school districts and education service districts. Now, this is not necessarily the key thing to remember here is to apply under what you're registered as with the Secretary of State. So make that whatever your program is, whether it's a faith-based organization or a nonprofit. Sometimes those sound the same, but technically they may not be. So again, whatever your group or company, for lack of a better term, is registered at with the Secretary of State, that should govern this eligibility and then application. And next slide, please. And finally, just in concise, to be eligible for a grant under this RFA, applicants must serve youth between the ages of 14 and 24 years of age. And those youth are one or more of the following: not enrolled in school, not employed, and enrolled in a YDD re-engagement program. Next slide, please. And I'll pass it back to Cord at this time.
All right. Hi, everybody. I am going to quickly pause on the presentation and note that I have gotten some questions in the chat that I was able to answer, but I will come back to the chat and we'll actually talk through the questions and responses when we get to the end of the slide deck. So I just want to let you know that I had the opportunity to answer some questions. We are going to read those out a little later on, and please feel free to enter them. We'll get to them gradually as time permits. So I want to just note here, talk about regions. This is going to be something you're addressing in SM Apply in task 2. It's page 1 of that SM Apply application. This is also information found in the RFA in sections 4.3.1 and 2. This RFA continues something that we have been doing for the last couple of years, which is awarding the top scoring application within each of the 11 regional solutions areas of the state. So you can see a map there that shows these regions. The online application asks questions about the county where services are located. The RFA has more information about how, if, for example, your business address is in a different location from your service address for this application, you can request to be considered within a region that is more appropriate. If a service address, is where you would be applying and it's different from the address you have as your business location. So there's more information in the RFA on this, but we just want to point out that our evaluation process has 2 steps. So we score all applications, but the first layer is to look at the top application for each region and then to move through the full slate of ranked applications and continue awarding after we've done the regional awards. Next slide, please. Priority populations, task 2, page 3. So this is in the RFA 1.3 and section 4.2.2. This is the first evaluation item. You'll be answering this question in SM Apply. So just want to quickly touch on this. Priority populations are named in the legislation. I've got a full list here. If your program is not serving any priority populations, you are still eligible to apply. However, preference is given to programs that are able to demonstrate they are actively and effectively serving youth from one or more of these priority populations. Other populations served. So this is not scored, but we are collecting this information at the request of a legislator came following the bill. There was a lot of curiosity about Future Ready and the degree to which it will be serving youth who are currently in the foster care system or who were previously in the foster care system. And I looked at one of the boxes disappeared, but also youth who are experiencing homelessness. So if you are serving those populations, please indicate that. Ultimately, we are trying to capture as much information as possible about the priority populations and these other populations that would be served by applicants and ultimately by grantees. Next slide, please. All right, and then we'll talk a little bit about the budget. So this is different from previous YDD grants. If you have applied for a grant with us before, applicants should indicate the total amount of funding you're requesting for this application, but you are not required to provide a detailed budget in your application. There are a couple of reasons for this. One is that generally we are not evaluating budgets as part of our applications, and so we felt that we wanted to test whether it was a more efficient process for applicants to not require that work of creating a budget until we have contingently awarded a grant. So I should say conditionally awarded. So once we have said you're awarded, you would have to complete and submit a detailed proposed budget with narrative that identifies the costs associated with fulfilling this RFA. So the detailed budget would be reviewed, and we might require adjustments during negotiation, which was already something that would happen. Essentially, we just want to allow you to focus on responding to the questions and save the work of budget creation for when you are conditionally awarded a grant. Administrative costs are allowed in this budget, as has been the case previously, allowable up to 15% of the applicant's total budget, or the federally negotiated indirect rate, whichever is greater. If you do have a federal indirect rate and a federal indirect rate letter, you'll be able to submit that, and we would then permit a rate over 15%. Last note here, something we want to make sure folks are aware of, is YDD grant funding is reimbursement based. Disbursements of funds are made on a quarterly basis following approval of reports. And I think we can go on to the next slide, and that actually gets us to the main event, questions and discussion. So just a reminder to please enter your questions in the chat. I'm going to scroll up and go back through those that we've already responded to. So we have a question here. The slide deck is going to be available. We'll put it on our website. I think we can hopefully pull the email addresses of all the registrants together pretty easily and send it out. We'll try to do that as well, if it's possible. Next question here, please define recognized credential. So there is a definition in the RFA. An industry recognized credential means a certificate or credential earned via specialized training that is accepted by a workplace, profession, or industry as evidence of sufficient skill for employment, qualifies you to attain employment, or confers an advantage to be considered for employment within the field. Applicants should present evidence of industry recognition and likelihood of job placement via attainment of this credential within the grant application. Additionally, industry recognized pre-apprenticeship program may be considered for such a credential. I know that's a very long answer, and there's a reason for that. There is not a list of industry recognized credentials. I know there are a list of federal fund eligible training providers, and we didn't want to use that. We wanted to open this up because we know there may be industries or even employers that are developing credentials that are really tailored to their workplace, that they would accept, that would do those things stated in terms of allowing for employment or creating a likelihood of employment. And so we want to give applicants the opportunity to describe how the credential they're offering is recognized by an industry and would lead to or be likely to lead to employment. Someone asked about where to find the grant questions. So I think there's two places you can find it. So the RFA section 4.2 is where we have all the questions that are found in SM Apply. There's also an attachment E that is attached to the application that shows all the contents of SM Apply. So you don't have to log in and click through to see everything that's in SM Apply, we've actually included that as an attachment to the RFA. So you'll see the same questions in both places. I also dropped a link in the chat to the RFA, and of course, there's a link in the slide deck as well. And now that brings us to the questions that we have not yet answered. I know we've got a few. So let's see here. Jessica Duke asks, for those agencies that may not be able to start any activities until funding comes through, is a no activity report sufficient for that first reporting due date? So the initial reports, and this is true for YDD's grants generally, we will adjust what is required in the initial report based on how long the agreement has been in place. I think the language in the RFA talks about the first report. Usually it will say the first report is due at a certain point in time following execution of a grant. So if the execution is delayed for some reason, we would not expect a report before the grant agreement was in place. And if there's a very limited amount of time before that first report is due to be submitted, then your grant manager would work with you on what contents would need to be in that report. So if, for example, you've only had a grant for 2 weeks and you have not yet spent funds or served youth, then you may just be submitting a narrative and talking about your plans to get the project up and running. But that is something you'd work with your grant manager on if you have not had a full quarter before the first report. But that initial report, that October 20th due date, is something we've done in order to be able to submit information to the legislature. We have a report due on the initial disbursement of future ready funds. So we need to be able to talk about the grants that we have made and share as much information as possible about any work that has taken place prior to October 31st. One other thing I should note too, to that question, if you're unable to start activities until funding comes through, that if it isn't until a grant agreement is in place, then yes, that all I said is true. But again, we want to reiterate that this grant funding is reimbursement based. It is not an upfront award of funds that are dispersed immediately. It is funding that is dispersed on a reimbursement basis following the submission and approval of reporting. And let me get down here. So what is a YDD re-engagement program? We have an answer there. It's a program that has received a YDD re-engagement grant. There, I believe, is a list on our website on the re-engagement tab. If there's not, then we could make that available. But essentially, the Youth Development Division has funding to support youth re-engagement programs. There are re-engagement opportunity grants and re-engagement collaborative grants. And so we mean programs that are recipients of those grant funds. And that comes out of the legislation that one of the groups of youth that is named in the bill are youth who are participants in a re-engagement program as described in statute, and those are the YDD re-engagement grants. Next question, this is from Marissa. If our organization is a registered organization in the Oregon Business Registry, but we have a fiscal agent, may that nonprofit fiscal agent also apply for a grant? Are we eligible if we have a fiscal agent? I'm going to turn that question over to my colleagues at ODE Procurement because I actually don't know what the current rules on fiscal agents are.
I'm gonna hop in and take this one. We're gonna have to get back to you because I think we need a little bit more information. Because when I think of fiscal agent with regards to Secretary of State registration, I think of an individual who does a lot of the paperwork and handles sort of the Secretary of State registration for someone who's out of state. So we will follow up and get more information, and the answer to that question will be published in the Q&A document.
Great, thank you, Philip. Yes, so Marissa, hopefully your email is the one that you registered with for this webinar. And if not, you can also contact the single point of contact. That's Bethany, listed on the RFA, and we'll definitely get more information and follow up on that one. So I realized I want to start a document where I can drop the questions that we have not been able to answer, so we make sure we get those together. Moving on to a question from Amanda. If an organization serves the defined population, not enrolled in school, not employed, and or enrolled in a YDD re-engagement program, can the organization use these funds to also offer services to youth who are not in this age group? You know, that is actually also a tough question. I think we would need to know more. I mean, by age group, if you mean youth who are outside of the age range of 14 to 24, I think the answer is probably no. The legislation very specifically names the age range for this grant. If I've misunderstood that question, if maybe you mean youth who are not one of those populations, I think
that is what I meant.
that is the
Yes,
question.
thank
Okay.
you.
We actually need to consult on that. I think we need to look at the legislation for that as well. I think that the goal of the legislation is very specific in terms of the youth populations that are named. So we'll take that one and we can come back with a definitive answer. So yeah, so to be determined if it is a youth, if a program is serving the defined population, would a youth who fell outside of that population be servable? We will try to find an answer for you quickly. But the age range of 14 to 24, I think is pretty strict.
Great, thank you.
Sure, thanks. Miranda asks, for applicants that cover multiple regions, how do you decide which region they'd be assigned to? And I think a similar question here, what if your organization serves statewide? You know, it's tough. Like we do not have a way to opt out of a region. I mean, I think that one option that we don't have would be to say, I don't want to be in regional consideration. But if you have to pick a region, the default would be the region that your business address is in. So if you have an address in Bend, then you'd be in the region that Bend is located in. If you're an organization that has an address outside of Oregon, then you would definitely need to identify a service address and choose a region. But unfortunately, there is not an option to choose to apply in multiple regions. And if you're choosing to apply in a region other than the region where your business address is located, there's guidance on doing that in the RFA. I hope that's an adequate answer.
Kind of, we serve the 9 tribes. And so it's hard to choose one of them, right?
Yeah, so that's, yeah, I mean, I think that if you're serving multiple communities, multiple tribes, that is kind of a challenge. I think that probably, you know, I really don't have an answer for how best to navigate that, because the whole regional model is really focused on trying to reach communities that sometimes, particularly because of their you know, location and perhaps the lack of some of the grant writing resources that are available in other places can get overlooked. We really want to see great geographical spread. So that's the goal of the regional model. You know, and if you are serving multiple locations, then it may be that the most appropriate thing would be to use your organization's address, unless if you are focused more so in any region, that would maybe be the one way that you might decide to apply to change to a different region if your services more than other places were taking place in one place.
Can we choose more than one region on the application?
Unfortunately, you can't, because we will, the awarding per region would require that we would only consider an application within a single region. So within a region, the applications are competing. Now, please keep in mind that after the regional awards, all of the remaining applications are also, they have been scored and they are ranked. So not getting a regional award is not meaning that you don't get a grant. It is just a way for us to take a first look at grants everywhere in the state and try to identify the best projects in every part of the state. But then the second phase of the evaluation process is to look at all applications ranked and to award based on the score statewide. So at that point, the regions are no longer in play. Is that helpful?
Sure, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, if we can talk more about this, and we will be putting a final answer to this in the Q&A. So if we can find a way to get a clear answer on that one, we will definitely try to do that, but I appreciate the question. So Kim asks, as a public school district, our boundaries include 2 of the regions. Which region do we select? Are we able to select 2 regions? And yeah, I mean, I think that this is kind of a similar scenario. I would say that probably, again, the default is going to be whichever of those 2 regions your business address is located in. You could also, if you felt that more of the services were happening you're serving more students, for example, in one area versus another, then you might apply to change regions based on where more young people are being served. And again, the goal of the regions is to really try to elevate applications from throughout the state. It doesn't mean that you can only be awarded if you are successful in that region.
So this is Kim, just a follow up because I put it in the chat to save you time. So if we are, let's call it our primary region that we serve, but we have students that are in our public school district that reside in another region, awarded, can we still use those funds for someone who is not a resident of that region?
Oh yeah, yes, thank you. That's a great clarification.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you.
The regions do not in any way restrict who you may serve. Definitely permissible to serve youth from any part of the state. You can serve youth in multiple locations. The regions are solely for consideration of the application in that first round of the evaluation. But no, if you're serving youth in 2 regions, it doesn't matter which region you apply in, in terms of being able to serve those youth.
Perfect. That's extremely helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Want to make sure I didn't skip anything. Okay, so I think the next question is from Mary. Question about target populations, out of school or out of work. Does that mean that the programs that serve youth who are in school, such as high school or college student, but does not have work as eligible? Yes, that, essentially that is, the goal is to serve youth who are not enrolled in school or not working. A youth who is not working but is enrolled in school would be eligible. So that is correct. Your understanding is right. Ashley asks, these are true state dollars, correct? So in round 1, this is state general fund dollars. Subsequent grants for Future Ready will be made with federal relief, ARPA relief funding dollars, but this round is general fund. Adelaide asks, does out of school youth include high school graduates? It does. So that's kind of one of the things here that is different from a re-engagement program eligibility, is that a youth who has earned a diploma or GED, but is not enrolled in school or is not working, or is not working, is eligible. So we know there are programs that are serving older youth who are disconnected from school and work, have earned a diploma, have earned a GED, but are not currently in school or not currently working. And yes, they're absolutely youth that you could serve with this grant. That would be a goal of this grant. Andrew asks, to clarify, all of the funding needs to go towards students who are not enrolled in school at the current time. And Andrew, I think that I may have kind of answered this already, but a student who is enrolled in school can be served under one of 2 circumstances. A youth who is re-engaged through a YDD re-engagement program, so has re-engaged in school, is enrolled in high school, but is a re-engagement program participant, definitely eligible. And a youth who is in school but is not working. So the goal here is to, for that young person, help them to obtain employment, either through job placement, paid work experience, or some kind of credential that would lead to employment. That youth would be eligible. The only youth who would not be eligible would be a young person who was in school and employed, and not in a re-engagement program. That would probably preclude you from participation. Date for awards to be messaged, and can a contract be backdated to July 1? So the goal is to announce awards by late August, possibly early September, but our goal is to announce before the end of August if we can. Contracts can be backdated to July 1. I will definitely say that we do not encourage folks to operate programs with the assumption of being funded, but if you are already doing work that this funding would support, it is permissible to be pursuing grant funding for an existing program, and then costs associated with that program back to July 1 could be covered in an initial reimbursement. but it has to be, again, these costs have to be associated with the program that is being applied for funding for. Let's see. Oh, I've got another question here. This one came in direct, but I want to read this one out. If you've already applied for other future ready funding, will this impact your funding consideration? This individual noted that it was asked in the application, and no, we are asking in the application if you have applied for or if you've received other future ready funds. We know that there are some HEC grants that are open right now. We know that the local workforce boards have received Prosperity 10,000 funding that is going out to CBOs. It's okay if you are receiving other future ready funds, but we do want to know, and it's really important for us to be able to identify what the use of the funds are, and to make sure that if you're pursuing future ready youth programs funds, you're using them for a distinct program, a distinct purpose, separate from other future ready funds. So just like any other funding, you can't pursue these funds and use them to displace other funding that you've already received. It has to be for a unique, distinct program. And that's why we're asking. We want to try to make sure that we're aware of that. We are working really closely with HEC. We want to talk about how organizations are grading funds, and maybe you're using one funding source for one side of the program and another funding source is covering a different set of expenses. You may be using different funds in different communities. All of that is really important for us to be aware of. We also ask if you've previously received YDD grant funding, and it's a similar thing. We actually just want to start to have a better sense of where organizations are receiving multiple different funding streams from YDD, from ODE, from state, and to better distinguish how those funds are being used. But it doesn't mean that you can't apply. The Future Ready funds are available even if you already have YDD grants, and you may apply for HEC funds for other purposes. Next question from Rachel. We applied for a YDD grant in February and are waiting for a response. Are we still eligible to apply for this grant, assuming we meet all qualifications? Rachel, answer is yes. Sorry to hear that you're waiting on a response from a grant you applied for that long ago. I will check on that. If you're receiving a YDD grant through our GCP funds, through our community investments, through our re-engagement funds, you are still eligible to apply for this grant. Can you talk more about the requirement for a government application to have a partner? We are a park and recreation agency that has our own workforce development program that teaches essential employment skills and offers paid work experiences in our departments. We still need a partner to provide those services. Cindy asked that question. Cindy, I may be mistaken. I think we only require a partner for schools, ESDs, and school districts. And should note that if you are a community-based organization or nonprofit organization that offers educational services, you should apply as a nonprofit. But if public school, ESD, or school district is required to apply with a partner involved in service provision, I believe, though, that that requirement is not the case for governmental entities such as cities or counties. I am going to just double check the RFA to make sure I'm right about that. And if anyone on my team knows if I'm right or wrong, please chime in.
Yeah, Cord, that's correct.
Yeah, so I think that the answer then is you could, if you are a park department, for example, and have a workforce program, you can apply for funds to support that program.
Okay, thank you. I just, when I was looking at the eligibility questions in Surveymonkey, and then in the questions, in the grant questions itself, it required me to check a box that said that we had a partner providing services. So I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, and you said that was an SM apply. I should check and see if maybe that's something we need to fix. Yeah, so that's a good question. We'll double check this and we'll make sure that if there's anything in terms of the checkbox that shouldn't be there, we'll clean that up. But in the RFA, as far as eligibility goes, it is only schools, ESDs, and school districts where we're requiring a partnership.
Thank you.
Next question is from Kristen. The grant's description mentions career exploration, What component of the grant, essential skills, or one of the three others would you like those activities described in? I think career exploration would fall within, it's tough because it could be an essential employability skill, but I would say something like a paid work experience or a internship or, other sort of, experience on a job site, a training, even a credential training that allows for a young person to get an experience and explore a career would count. So, I have to go back and look at where that term is used, but what we're really looking for is, those requirements, the essential employability skills, plus one of those three different services named in the bill. So paid work experience, job placement and coaching, or industry recognized credential. I think where career exploration falls in that, we would leave to you to kind of tell us. Another question, Jennifer, Willamette Educational Service District has a career preparation program. Would tuition-based slots in the program be an allowable expense? So if I understand correctly, this is using grant funds to offset tuition costs. And I think we should probably follow up on that answer. I don't want to answer that one on the spot. I don't know that we have, I don't think we have language in the RFA that addresses that. So we may need to get clarification, but I think we will just try to come back to you with an answer on that one. All right. Tabitha asks, do you have any further details about the types of accepted evidence that a workplace certification will be recognized by the applicable industry? If this is a certification our workplace created, are there any specific details that would make our description of its job placement benefits seem especially legitimate? That's a really good question, Tabitha. We don't have details beyond what we have provided in the RFA. Our goal was to try to find a balance between, a threshold for legitimacy. It's saying like this will really help a young person get a job in an industry, but also recognizing that we didn't want to preclude something innovative where, say, an industry that is, say, new to the apprenticeship space is we want to create an apprenticeship, or an employer in a community says we want to create a pipeline for young people to get a credential that gets them a job in our place. So I would just refer you back to the language. We've kind of named some things that we would like to see as evidence, but I don't really have additional details. We don't have anything beyond what is in the RFA. Our goal is just to allow for folks to do their best to demonstrate that this is something that would be recognized by an employer. Holly asks, are you required to serve 14 to 24, that full age range, or can you serve 18 to 24? You can serve a portion of the age range. You don't have to serve the entire 14 to 24-year-old range. The youth you serve just have to fall within that 14 to 24 range. They should be age 24 or younger when they enter your services for this grant. A question from Kim, can we apply under the region in which we serve the majority, which would be Mid-Valley for us, yet still serve the students within our public school district that reside in another region? Kim, I recognize this question because we spoke about this, and the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, that shows you how far behind I am. This is great. Pause to say we really appreciate everyone who's joined us and is submitting questions. Are there regions of the state that are traditionally underserved? If so, could we possibly concentrate our primary efforts in that region as well as others, but apply with that primary region listed on the application? I think the short answer to that, Marissa, is probably yes. We are not in this grant providing like region-specific data, but I can tell you that we know from whether it's school completion data, unemployment data. There's a whole lot of different data points that you might look at that you could use to say that this is a region that is underserved. I should point out that rural and frontier communities, I know some folks are not fans of the frontier terminology. It's what's in the statute. The bill calls out rural communities as a priority for this legislation, which I think is in recognition that a lot of rural parts of Oregon are underserved historically, economically. And And so, you know, an applicant certainly could look at serving an underserved region. Our regional award process is not really tied to that specifically. It's really about elevating applications from around the state, but it is about making sure that applications from regions that are underserved are brought up and funded in that first look. Leah asks if there are restrictions on uses of the funding. For example, can we pay youth to work in a business under these funds? That example is an absolute yes. Yes, you can use these funds to pay wages to youth. There is a BOLI attachment in the RFA about youth labor laws. If your organization is hiring youth and paying youth, we think that's awesome. That is an allowable use of funds. Just make sure that you look at the BOLI compliance piece. The restrictions on funding are found in the RFA in the budget section, which I've got to quickly remind myself. In RFA section 3.2, in that area of the RFA, there is a section that talks about disallowed costs. So for example, you cannot buy a vehicle. There are some other limitations in terms of what you can use these dollars for. But wages for youth, anything that, you know, forms of stipends or support services for youth are definitely allowable. So evaluation item 3, Jody Tenner asks, partnerships, evaluation item 3, partnerships gets 80 points. Partnerships, here you're saying nonprofits are not required to have partnerships, but if a nonprofit applies without partners, do they then lose those 80 points? So it is up to 80 points. That 80 points is the maximum score you can get on the section. And yes, the evaluation item partnerships is there because even if you're not required to have partners, partnerships are definitely something that the YDD sees as incredibly valuable to our grants. We see it as very important. And so there is information in that evaluation item on what we are looking for. And that is something that every application is evaluated on. So the requirement for partnerships is one piece, but we are going to evaluate every application on evaluation item 3 around partnerships. Word limit for each question is actually shown in a couple of places. So on the RFA, I believe, if you get to section 4.2.2 and beyond, all of the questions there in the RFA, there is a word limit shown. Usually it's around 200 or 300 words. These are tighter word limits than we have previously used. So it is really going to require some focus, some brevity in the responses, but the word limits are also shown in SM Apply. So when you go to fill out your application, you will see a word limit in the question. As you are entering your question, you'll see how many words you've entered. So you'll be able to see exactly where you are in terms of the word limit. Kristen asks if grant funds can be used to pay for paid work experiences for youth and for needs of youth pursuing credentials. Yes, absolutely. 100,000%. Got it. Oh, got it. Oh, I think the question that I just answered got cut off. The word limit for each answer is incredibly limiting. Any chance of expanding some of those? I'm afraid not. We're really trying to see if we can push these to a little bit greater brevity. And it really is to help us expedite that review process. It's one of the goals we have is to try to have a fairly quick turnaround from closing the application to awarding. And one way that we've decided to try to do that is through both the way that we've structured some of the responses and by having a tighter word limit on responses. So this may be something we learn is hard, you know, for us to. I know we often read things and have more questions. We recognize that's a challenge. So appreciate you asking, but right now we are sticking to the limits shown in the RFA. See, Logan says, I believe you mentioned that funds can be applied towards costs of existing relevant services and programming. Would that include using these funds to expand programming from other general fund programs, such as the Oregon Youth Employment Program? I mean, I think that this is kind of similar to what I was saying about other future ready funds or other YDD funds. As long as this grant is being used for something that is distinguishable from another program or service that you are funding with other dollars, then that is something you could do. So, I mean, I think an example would be if you've got a program that's serving 100 youth and you say you're going to use these funds to expand that to 250 youth, that is something you could do. Or you're going to serve, you're serving the west side of Grant County and you're going to use this to serve the east side of Grant County. That's totally fine. As long as it can be distinguished, as long as it's clearly a different program, a different activity from what you were already receiving funding for, that would be permissible.
I have a follow-up question to that. Actually, if we have funding to do our workforce development for youth program over the summer, but we would be applying to use these funds to continue it into the fall and winter, would that also work?
I think so. Can you just drop it in the chat for me, though? It is a good follow-up, but I just want to make sure we answer that one directly.
Yes,
I think the answer is yes, but please, yeah, drop it in the chat. Miranda asks if funds can be used to reimburse a portion of salary and fringe for staff working on the project. Yes. The budget section in the RFA, I'm trying to find my way back to here. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's actually an attachment on the RFA. So if you go to the end of the document, attachment E, I believe, or maybe it's attachment D, excuse me. There is a sample budget that shows you the budget categories. Personnel, which would include salaries and fringe, is a permissible budget use. Operations, supplies and materials, equipment, travel and transportation, professional development and training. Those are all listed. We have separate categories for wages, incentives, and other direct payments to youth. So it's definitely permissible. We just need to make sure we identify those costs, and subcontracts and subgrants to service providers. So if you are going to be providing any subgrants or subcontracts, that should be addressed separately in your budget. And again, you'll be creating the budget or submitting the budget if you are conditionally awarded. So you don't have to submit this with the application, but you can take a look at that budget attachment to see what the categories are. Mary asks, is it permissible to use funds for a program that allows youth outside the age range? The program allows 13 to 15-year-olds. Could we use the funding for the program even though 13-year-olds are outside the age range? I mean, that's a tough one because on the one hand, if you were serving 14 and 15-year-olds, that theoretically would be permissible. But I know that a lot of times in a program, you're not sort of dividing which youth are being served with which dollars. I think we're going to have to come back to that question. We'll have to follow up on that one. And get you a definitive answer on that, / like provide some pretty clear guidance on if it is permissible, how you would need to go about doing that. So thanks, Mary, for that question. We will have to work on the response for that one. Tabitha asks, thanks, this is the question you just asked on the mic. So can funds be used to continue a workforce development program offered to youth into fall and winter of 2022-23? So the program is currently funded through this summer. And yes, seeing it now, that is something you could do. So let's say that you want to continue activities that you had funding for, and this funding would allow you to persist, continue that program. That's definitely something that would be allowable. But again, that's assuming it meets the other requirements of the grant in terms of services delivered. And I think I've made it to the end of the questions. If I have missed your question, I would say now might be an appropriate time to unmic. If I have missed something in the chat, go ahead and call our attention to it, please. And not hearing anything, I can hang on for a few more minutes. We scheduled this to run until 11:30, just in case we had a lot of questions. But I think that if there are no, I want to actually maybe take a moment, if there are any comments or thoughts from other folks from ODE Procurement or YDD, anything that you would want to add, we can take a moment for that. I do see another message coming in here. We're not rushing off, but if you have any other questions, folks, please drop them in the chat. And for my colleagues, any other thoughts or words you'd like to share?
Hi, Cord. It's Holly from Southeast Works.
Hi, Holly.
Hi there. Nice to see you again.
You as
I
well.
just wanted to say I've been working on the grant application, and it's quite difficult to get all of the information in that is required in the sections. It's been a challenge. I write a lot of grants, and trying to get all of it into 200 to 250 and 300 words, it really is a very big challenge. And so I was worried about, getting enough in so that the reviewers would get the information they need, to make the decisions. So while I applaud you for not doing a crazy big RFP with 1 million questions, it has been a challenge trying to get the information into 200 to 300 words.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback, Holly. I based on your comment there and another question that we got, we may have to reflect on this and think about this another way. Our intention was definitely to try to see if that would be a way for us to be able to get reviews done more quickly. Depending on the responses, we may get a lot of applications. But I hear you. I think we're going to assess, I don't know if this is a silver lining, but it is, I guess, the same challenge for everyone. And it may be that we see that we want more and reflect on that. And in the future, we look at a different word limit. Appreciate you bringing it up, though. Your feedback's always appreciated.
I would just say, and this is the end of my feedback, if you got it to 300 words, even that's a help from 200 to 300. So if that's possible, just trying to get all of the information in is a challenge. And I think even 250 is, but if each section was up to 300, then, I think it would do the job. But that's my last 2 cents worth.
No, that's helpful. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, Laverne drops a note in there, all for the brevity of responses, but the questions being asked need to be less as well. And I think this is the challenge, and hope folks will forgive us sometimes. I think in our we're sometimes pretty iterative. We're always trying new things and trying to improve, and it could be that this has created some real challenges for folks that we just didn't consider well enough. And if that is the case, I definitely, our goal is not to make it harder. We're really just trying to figure out ways to combine speed with really getting effective responses. So we may learn from this that we need to approach it differently. So we hear you on that. And then I saw one other question popped up as well. Would these funds be eligible to build out training or internship experiences by putting together eligible training provider list certifications geared towards specific youth's career interests? I don't know if I totally understand the question. I don't want to overinterpret it, Logan. I think it'd be okay if you want to come off mute and maybe ask it. Maybe I can get a better sense of what you're thinking.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess I'm just anticipating the challenge of maybe not finding a work experience for a youth, but wanting to try and find a way to help build a resume and provide some experience that gives them a window. So in that event, could I say, hey, let's look through this eligible training provider list or other local or available trainings and say, let's pick some that kind of give you a taste of what that experience will be or what those expectations will be, and then kind of build an experience for them that way.
It's tough. I mean, I don't know if I can answer this question other than to say that that approach would just have to match with the required services. So the trainings would have to be delivered. The trainings would have to be available and accessed by youth. If it were for, job placement would have to occur. I think that the key thing is that those required services are being delivered. And I kind of recognize that sounds like that's the challenge. But in terms of what would be eligible for this funding, however you would go about it, it would have to result in the delivery of those trainings or services or placement and paid work experience.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna see your comment here about the responses. Yeah, yeah, and Laverne, we've actually done that before, and I would admit that I did not do that exercise in this case, and I think that we also debated our word counts a lot. So it may be that, you know, in this particular case, you know, that you know, we might have to acknowledge that we've created something really challenging, but we do hope folks will forgive us and take on that challenge of brevity and do their best to provide responses as required. Again, I'll pause. I know I've talked a whole lot. I want to make sure I give anyone else on our team a chance to say anything they'd like to, correct me if I have offered bad advice. We did capture, I've got a few questions that we did not answer. We'll follow up. Again, look for everything in that final document coming out after this week when we close the Q&A period. We'll get that information posted to the website. We can compile a list of all the attendees here and also share information with you directly. All right, well, thanks everybody. I believe we can go ahead and wrap it up. My understanding is that since we had registration, we do not need to stay on until 11:30. It's everyone who had signed up or our attendees. So I saw you nod, Bethany. So I think that means we can all close the meeting. All right, thank you so much, everybody. We're gonna go ahead and close the doors here. Have a nice afternoon.